We've got a charged atmosphere for two rivals in the East Division. It's the Moonshine Throwdown, Marshall and Western Kentucky.
It's intercepted by Key, and Key has one man to beat. A nice cut move. Edwards can't get him. Key takes it all the way. A pick six for Devin Key.
There goes Key. Splits the defenders and he's gone. 65 yards, he completes it with a somersault.
So please join me in welcoming the 21st head coach in WKU football history, Tyson Helton.
And Marshall is going to finish the year 9-4 and champions of the 2018 Gasparilla Bowl, the sixth consecutive bowl win for the Marshall Thundering Herd.
We are back. It's Steven. I've got Trace with me here. We've got another edition of the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. Ready to review a couple games and preview the next week two's games. Before we get started, I want to make notice that KD is not with us today. The reason being, Mother Nature has decided to send a hurricane his way. He's down there in Florida, in Tampa. He's not in the path of the hurricane by any means, but he will likely be experiencing some high winds, some rain, possibly loss of electricity. So our guy's taking a break this week, looking out for his family, making sure they're safe and in good hands. So we're thinking about KD. We're going to pick up the bag and run with it for him this week. We'll do our best, and we're going to pray for him. I hope he can get back to us safe, hopefully next week. So that being said, let's go. If you're listening, please subscribe to the podcast. As everybody should know by now, we are available on pretty much every platform. Wherever you can find a podcast, you can find us, and you'll subscribe to us, get those updates whenever we publish new content, put out new episodes. You'll get updated and can listen to that on your commute to or from work or as your day goes on. And as always, find us on Twitter. We're at Moonshine TD for the rivalry account, then at MSTD_podcast for the podcast. And then Trace is at Trace_Johnson94. And I am at Mobstradamus. So that being said, we had week one games in the book. Marshall starts out by hosting VMI. He got a convincing victory there, 56-17. So good start to their season. And Western Kentucky, kind of stuck up the joint, hosted UCA, took a loss. We'll dive in more to both of those games here shortly. Western lost 35-28. The Marshall VMI game, I didn't get to watch it. I was at work, but just from keeping up with the highlights and everything I've seen, it just looked like Marshall just had their way with VMI. I mean, they had over 600 yards of offense. 340 of those were passing, 280 were rushing, 11 different wide receivers caught balls, 7 different running backs put yards on the board, and they held VMI to 257 total yards of offense. So a balanced attack. Seems like, they did whatever they want. So Trace, with that being said, lead us in what I'm sure you watched and were probably at the game. So, give us your thoughts. How did that game play out for you and versus what you expected? How was the Marshall performance in week one?
Yeah, I mean, it was a solid performance. It really was. I mean, I kind of predicted that I expected some first game rust, and there was a little first game rust in that first quarter. They kind of took a while to get going, and there were a few kind of uncharacteristic penalties that not enough people or that usually wouldn't usually be a factor, but are because of the first game rust. But that's outside of that, they were pretty sharp, really. I mean, they really played well. Offense, those total yards they put up was the most total yards they put up in 4 seasons, and that's a long time. And then also the most amount of points that they've put up in a game since the 2016 opener against Morgan State. So we're talking 3+ years, 4 years that they've had that kind of offensive production. And hopefully that's a sign of things to come moving forward, because, that could really bode well for the rest of the season, because that's what I keep saying, that Marshall's offense has really been the only reason why they haven't had a chance to win a conference title over the last couple of years. So hopefully it's getting righted. Defense played really well. I mean, really only gave up 7 realistic points because 10 of those points were on the backups and third stringers in garbage time. So they really only gave up 7 points. It was pretty, like I said, a pretty dominant performance, but I mean, it's what I expected. I actually predicted the score to be 45-6. So like, even though that score wasn't right, I got the margin of victory exactly right at 39 points. So take that for what it's worth. But yeah, I mean, it was a good way to start the season. Hopefully they can keep going with that, because they have a huge challenge coming up, and get into more grades here coming up. But yeah, it was a solid performance for sure.
I'd say that's a little bit of an understatement, guys. I mean, it looks like y'all just dominated. Just looking at the stats on paper, I mean, y'all just killed it. So come out of fall ball now, we talked about all the position battles and, expecting the unexpected there and not knowing, exactly what you're going to get on the field. And now the lights came on. You had a great performance. So your team's 1-0. You're heading into a big matchup with Boise State coming up this weekend. At this point, after one game, what do you say that you know about Marshall football now and what to expect going forward? What do you know?
Well, I think I'm getting to the point where I know that the wide receiving unit is actually going to be better than I thought it would be, because I noticed in the first game, especially heading into the season, there were some question marks surrounding the wide receiving unit, whether or not anybody would step up. And in my opinion, they really stepped up big time against VMI. Like, they really played well. Like, all those young guys are starting to emerge already. Now, maybe it was just because it was against VMI and they're terrible, but like, those young guys really started to step up. I mean, Corey Gamage, Brock Thompson, all those other receivers, R.D. Henry, Willie Johnson, they all really stepped up, made plays. I think that was a really good sign for the rest of the season for the Herd. And that's without Obi Obialo, their projected number 1 receiver, was in a walking boot on the sideline, didn't even play against VMI. So if they can get him healthy, coming up with Boise, and that would be really suited well for the Herd to possibly pull off an upset. So, I mean, I was really impressed with how the receivers played. Now, I'm not going to just go out on a limb and say that they're going to be a great unit for sure this year, because it's only a very small sample size, but I really liked what I saw out of those receivers. And I think that they're going to be a big key to the success. If whatever success Marshall has, will be a lot of that predicated on how the receivers play. And Corey Gamage, I think he is really going to be the next great Marshall receiver. Maybe not this year immediately, but he's got all the makings. I mean, he's a super talented guy. And I think a lot of those guys are starting to step up and make plays. So that really is positive for the rest of the season. Yeah, I agree. Just keeping up with the game online, I know you had a couple guys that got knocked out of the game. I know Isaiah Green was knocked out for a little bit. I think he came back, though, after halftime and ended up playing more. Yeah. And also your linebacker, Jaquan Yulee, got knocked out of the game in what had to be a scary moment. So give us a little update on those guys. What do we know about those guys and what's going on with those injuries and the injury situation as a whole for Marshall after game 1? Yeah, like you said, Green got nicked up a little bit there towards the end of the first half. He went. He had a pretty good run and he slid, and the VMI guy kind of came at him while he was sliding, and everybody in the crowd was just really upset because they thought that was a dirty play, and I think it was a dirty play too, and the guy got ejected for it, rightfully so. But yeah, it was pretty scary, especially considering about a quarter before that, Jaquan Yulee goes down. He lays a huge hit on the VMI receiver to break up a pass on 3rd down and short that they would have caught had he not made the hit. But that was a scary moment. You never want to see that. It's just the worst thing that can happen in sports is when a guy's down like that. And, it took about 10 minutes for them to get him onto the stretcher and get all this stuff cut off and all that. And it was a scary moment. And it just really sucks because he's a guy that everybody's been wanting to see fully unleashed. He's a guy that's paid his dues. He's waited his time and now he's out for the year. But probably going to get a medical red shirt obviously now. So he should still have 2 more years to play. But yeah, that's just, you hate to see that. And it was really cool today to see him come back to Marshall's practice just 30 hours after having surgery on his neck and come out there and everybody embrace him. It was an awesome moment. It just shows how much the team cares for him and how much of an impact he has. So I think that's going to be a big time focal point moving forward as kind of like a battle cry, because they've done that in the past. In 2014, Evan McKelvey tore his ACL in the 4th game of the year, I believe. And then every week every week following that injury, minus 1 week, somebody wore Evan McKelvey's jersey, and that really paid off kind of a motivational factor. So I expected the same thing to happen with Yuli. It was really cool to see him come back, even though he's out for the year, which sucks, but like he'll come back strong. I have no doubt about it.
Yeah, and as a CUSA rival, I mean, you just never wanted to see that happen. I remember it happened last year at the MTSU game. We went to one of their players went down and was motionless for several minutes, and it took a long time to clear him off field. So glad to hear he's okay and up and active now, because that could have been real bad. So glad he's okay. In the long run he'll be okay and should be able to come back and play. So let's jump into some grades for the performance. How would you rate your quarterback play? I know you saw multiple guys. How would you overall rate your quarterback play against VMI?
Yeah, overall, I'm going to rate it an A. I thought they really played well collectively. Isaiah Green, it wasn't his best game at Marshall, but he still played really well, in my opinion. Looking at his a little closer, he had a 64% completion percentage, which is pretty high. That's a lot higher than his season average was last year. Had a career high 4 touchdown passes, one of only 5 to 10 Marshall quarterbacks that's ever thrown 4 touchdowns in a game before, so that was good. He did have one really bad interception on an underthrown ball, and threw for 238 yards. Also ran the ball a lot more than I expected. He had 46 yards rushing, and he ran it a lot, even after he got dinged up at the end of the first half, and he came back for about half of the third quarter. He was even running it then after the injury that it looked like the little stinger. So that was surprising. So, and then Alex Thompson, as rough as he looked at times last year, he looked really sharp in this game. It was probably, the game was out of reach and whatever, but his throws just looked a lot crisper. He had a lot more zip on the ball. He was 6 for 7 for 102 yards and 1 touchdown. That was a really, really good performance. I was really impressed by Thompson. So that's a good sign. If we never want this to happen, but if Green would get hurt, Thompson looks like he could come in and pick up the slack this year. He did a decent job of that last year, but he was still very inconsistent. So overall quarterback play, I'm going to say an A. It was very solid overall, both guys.
Yeah, that sounds very fair considering their performance. What about the offense overall? How would you rate them?
Offense overall, I'm going to go A+, because I really thought this was a phenomenal offensive performance. It's like I said, earlier, 620 total yards. That's the most total yards they've had since, I think it was 2015 against Charlotte. And then 56 points is the most amount of points they put up since 2016 against Morgan State. So, it's a long time coming for those offensive numbers. And, 56 points and 620 total yards, that's got to be a high grade on anybody's book. And then, like you said earlier, 340 yards passing, 280 yards rushing. You love to see that balance. If that continues, then I think Marshall's going to have a fantastic season offensively. If that kind of production and that can, balance continues, they'll have a great year. 9.4 yards per pass, 6.1 yards per rush. And another really cool thing I think about that is they ran for 280 yards and the top rusher only had 75 yards. So they had a bunch of guys spreading the wealth at running the ball, and that's impressive. Did have a couple turnovers, but one of them was just in garbage time. It didn't matter. And then Green's interception. So yeah, offense really couldn't have done a whole lot more given the circumstances. So I'm going to go A+. It was a offensive performance they haven't had in a while.
Yeah, I'd agree. Like you said, just a lot of playmakers touched the ball. Nobody was really got the lion's share. Just a lot of people made plays, it looks like. So definitely A+. That sounds great. Then on the defensive side, you held them to 17 points, 7 of those, against the first 3 years, like you said, and 257 yards. So how would you rate your defensive performance?
Yeah, I'm going to go A for the defense. I thought they played really well. Like you said, 257 total yards. They literally more than doubled their total yards, something like that. I'm not the best with math, but something like around those lines. Only allowed 17 points, and like I said earlier, only 7 points really with the starting lineup. So the backups and the third stringers and whatever in garbage time gave up 10 points. So that really doesn't even count really, but that's still really impressive. They had 4 sacks. They had 8 TFLs, 11 quarterback hurries. They really rushed the passer really well, got in his space, made life difficult. So that's a good sign of what Herd fans think the defense can look like for the rest of this season, and quite frankly, what the defense has looked like for most of the last several years. Outside of 2016, the defenses have been strong. So looks like they're off to a good start. with that. So I'm going to go A overall for the defense.
All right. What about the special teams guys? How would you rate them?
Yeah, special teams, they played really well too. I'm going to go A for the special teams. And for one big reason, for the first time since 2015, Marshall had a punt return for a touchdown. I mean, it had been a long time coming. But Talik Keaton looks like he's going to be that next guy. I was talking on the special teams episode. They haven't had much of a factor at punt returners since DeAndre Reeves back in 2015. And now it looks like they finally have one with Keaton. I cannot wait to see what he looked really, really good as a redshirt freshman out there returning punts. He had obviously the long punt return for the touchdown, which was spectacular. And then he also had a couple other nice returns. So I think they finally found their punt returner after a few years of not really doing much in that aspect. And then as far as the punting goes, Robert Lefebvre had a really solid day. He only punted, I think, 3 times, but he had a 44.7 yards per punt average. Warwasser had a good day, even though he didn't attempt any field goals. He was 8 for 8 on extra points, had some, a bunch of touchbacks. He did have a kickoff out of bounds, which was kind of But overall, though, I mean, you can't really ask for much more from the special teams. I mean, a punt return for a touchdown, that's huge in its own right. So I'm going to go A for the special teams.
All right. How about the coaching side of things? How do you rate your coaches for the game?
Yeah, coaches really did good. I'm going to go A for the coaches. I thought they really had them ready to play. And I think the biggest difference between – not really difference, but the biggest thing that I noticed from the coaching is after that Yulee situation, they really handled it well. After that, it would be kind of hard sometimes to come back as a team, because you're kind of distraught and kind of worried, obviously, about your teammate. And the coaches, I thought they really handled it well. They had them ready to go, emotionally, physically, whatever. That's a hard thing to come back from sometimes. So the coaching did a really good job. Also, another thing I think underrated factor is they didn't really show much for Boise on film. They kind of just ran their base offense, didn't really do anything tricky at all. So I think that's going to bode well because Boise's not going to be able to prepare for plays if they haven't seen them on film. So hopefully that they're saving some of that for Boise. Also, they played a lot of young guys. So many guys played in this game, and I think that's going to pay dividends in the future because those guys now have some PT. So coaching, I'm going to go A. Actually, it was a really solid start.
All right. Well, I'm noticing a trend here on the grades so far. So we got one left, and that's going to be the overall grade. And I might know what you got coming for me. What's your overall grade for the Thundering Herd?
Well, you have a pretty good sneaking suspicion. It's going to be an A. It was definitely an A performance, not A plus, because I like I've said before, I think it's really hard to get an A plus, at least for my ranking system, because that basically means the game's perfect. And this was a very, very good performance. Great performance, probably even, but not perfect. But I mean, overall, every aspect they were dialed in. I mean, the offense came out there and had a game that they hadn't had in several years. The defense played really well. The special team scored. A lot of guys played, put up 56 points, only gave up 17. I mean, all that stuff. That's just really impressive. And even though it was VMI and they're a terrible team, that's still a good start. So I'm going to go A overall. It was no doubt an A performance to start the year.
Yeah, so all those grades sound fair, man. Good victory in the bag there for sure.
All right, on the flip side of this rivalry, the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers also had an FCS opponent on the dock in week 1, and as Stephen alluded to, didn't start out the way Western Kentucky had hoped for. Most people thought it was pretty inconceivable that they would lose to an FCS team at home for the second year in a row. However, they did. Central Arkansas upsets Western Kentucky 35-28. Western had a 28-14 lead. It looked like they had it in the bag, came out really hot, just could not sustain that, which has been an issue quite often for Western in the last year or two, and it reared its ugly head again. Looking at some of the total yards, Western actually outgained Central Arkansas 488-424. So the offense did enough, and they only gave up 20 yards rushing to Central Arkansas, which was obviously a solid performance. But the one big caveat to this game was a couple costly turnovers for Western. Central Arkansas had 0 turnovers. Western had 2 turnovers. So that ended up, probably leading to some points that they normally would not have given up. So just a rough start to the year. I mean, 0-1 start with an FCS loss on your head coach's first game. That's just not a good sign. You know, the fan base is not going to be high on that. Obviously, they expected more out of that. I mean, it might not even be Helton's fault. It was just the fact that Western Kentucky's got some issues personnel wise. Probably they still have to figure stuff out. So, Stephen, I'm sure you were there. Like, I was at the Marshall game. I think you said you were at this game. But what did you see from the crowd, from TV, whatever? What did you think about this game? I know we kind of texted about it a little bit in a group text the other day, but let's go. Just hear what you think in a vacuum about this game briefly before we get into some more stuff.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of a roller coaster of a game because, you know, we started quick in this game. UCA got the ball first. They tried to run 3 straight times. We stuffed them. You know, they weren't going to run the ball on us. They punted to us. We get the ball one play. First carry of this running back's career, Gage Walker, he has a 68-yard rushing touchdown on the first play, which is eerily similar to how we started off last year versus Maine. First play of the season, big touchdown pass to Lucky Jackson. We know how that ended. That ended with a loss. So turn around, you know, we jump out to a 14-0 lead. We get the ball back. Short field, they had like an 11-yard punt. Short field, we end up having a false start penalty, rushing for no gain, incomplete pass, and then a turnover. You know, Stephen Duncan throws one of his 2 turnovers. Had an open receiver, just didn't lead him, threw it behind him, and the guy picked it off. So, you know, like you said, you know, you hate to lose. You don't expect to lose, especially when we start out fast, you know, 14 points in the first quarter. And then we end the game with only 28. You know, we were up 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, end up giving up 21 unanswered points and losing the game. So overall, it's disappointing. I saw a lot of positives, though. I mean, the offense was definitely better. The play calling was better. The playmakers were used better. But it just seemed like we got out of rhythm and kind of out of sync and, you know, almost tried to get too cute with it when we got up 14-0 instead of just pounding them, you know, just keeping what working. You know, the first start for this running back, he has 151 yards, 2 touchdowns. You know, this guy is very impressive. You know, in our running back preview, you know, we might have mentioned his name. You know, I don't even remember hardly mentioning his name. He was a converted defensive back. So, you know, really surprised a lot of people. Helton rode the hot hand, and he was producing. He had over 100 yards at halftime, ended the game with 151. So we kind of went away from that in the second half. You know, I'm gonna go back. I started to watch the replay again today because when I was at the game, I was in the tents, kind of a bad angle down on the field from the end zone to really see the plays, how they're developing. But I'm going to watch the replay to get a better feel for it. But it sounds like Duncan didn't have a good night passing, even though if you look at his stat line, you know, he completed 66% of his passes. He had over 300 yards. He had a touchdown, but he also had 2 interceptions. Just seemed like he wasn't quite in sync with his receivers. I know he missed some big throws that could have turned into big plays. We had 1 touchdown in the fourth quarter, you know, taken off the board because of a holding penalty. You know, the defensive side of the ball, like you mentioned, we held them to 20 yards rushing. They weren't going to run the ball on our defensive line. I mean, those guys were stout. They did what they were supposed to do. They were in the backfield harassing them and pretty much forced them, the UCA, to go passing only. And they were moving the quarterback out of the pocket a lot. He was mobile, and we're finding open guys. They were making plays, moving the chains, and they ended up stealing a victory. Our secondary got burned a lot, was out of position a lot, bid on a couple trick plays, a couple play actions, you know, just completely burned. One, you know, in the fourth quarter, 90-yard touchdown. Nobody was within 15 yards of the guy. They bit so hard on a halfback pass. So everything that was wrong and that caused this loss is stuff that we can clean up. You know, we can get in the film room, the coaches and the players can go over it and see exactly what we did wrong, how we're out of position, and we can clean it up. So, yes, it's bothersome that we lost, but, if you watch the game or if you were there, you can feel that this is a different and a better coach team than what we saw last year. So, I'm not down on this team at all. Obviously, I wanted to win. But I don't think it spells doom for the rest of the season. I think we can clean up what happened and move on from it and learn from it and still end up having a good season. Whether it hurts our bowl chances, that's to be seen. We still would have to steal a couple victories unexpectedly. But I think we have a good team. I think we just saw some first game rust and inconsistency that I expected. In the season preview leading up to today, I didn't expect 40 points per game in game one. And anybody that did expect that, they just were wrong and misguided. That wasn't going to happen in game one. Should it have happened against an FCS team? Possibly. But I think we'll get there. Helton seems to have a good handle on the team. When he speaks to the media, he's not just blowing smoke up your butt. He's telling you really, we didn't execute properly. We missed some assignments. It is what it is. So I think we'll get there. I really think we'll get there, and I'm still positive and upbeat about the season, even though, we took a loss in week one.
Yeah, it's like you said. Even with a loss, there's still usually always positive to take away. And it looked like the offense from the stats and from whatever stuff, however much anybody saw, it looked like the offense was a step above what it was last year, at least in game one. With 400 or nearly 500 total yards, you'd maybe like to see 35 points or more or whatever, which eventually they'll maybe even 40, but eventually that'll start getting corrected. Like first game rust, like I said, that was a little bit of an issue for Marshall there in the first quarter. First game rust is an issue for most teams in the country. Even the so-called blue blood teams have that issue sometimes. So, with Western, it's not the end of the world. It's a pretty rough stain to start a tenure for a head coach, but it's not insurmountable. It's the first game. There's still 11 more. They have to win 6 of them. So, to get to a bowl at least. So, the season's not over for sure. So with that being said, what did you learn from the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers after their week one performance, tough loss? What did you learn from Western Kentucky after the first game?
Well, we've got some playmakers. The cupboard definitely isn't bare. The ball was spread around a lot. A lot of guys had touches. We mentioned Gage Walker, first start as a running back, first touch, took it to the house for a touchdown, ended up with 151 yards. I didn't look it up, but I'm not sure that ever happened during the Sanford regime. And so I think that was good playing experience for him. We got a tight end, Simon, true freshman that had a touchdown in the game. Seems to be a big target and very athletic body. Stephen Duncan, getting the keys to the car. He seemed more comfortable. But, we still need to get fully in rhythm and in sync. I know Helton said we'd like to see Ty Story get in the game and still make some plays for us, but he didn't get plugged in this game. But I'd still like to see what he has to offer. So I know that we're better than we were, even in loss, even if it's, last year we lost 4 games by 3 points or less, and then, we turn around and do this again. It kind of feels like the same old song. But this team's going to get there. I think we're gonna upset a couple people that we shouldn't beat, and we're still probably going to lose a couple games that we shouldn't lose. I think that's what happens to a first year coach. Jeff Brom was 7-5 in his first year. I think that turned out pretty good when we went 12-2 and 11-3 the next 2 years. So I think we're still heading in the right direction as a program and as a team. Even in defeat to this FCS school, they still were a very good opponent. They did what they did and needed to do. They came in and stole a victory. So hats off to them.
Yeah, and I think you made a really good point right there talking about Jeff Brom. It's tough for anybody to rebound and figure out how to win and be successful without a great head coach when your head coach leaves you or retires or whatever the situation may be. It's tough. I mean, it's for pretty much any team. I mean, just think if Nick Saban would leave Alabama right now. Do you think the next coach would immediately come in and take over and just be like Nick Saban? Probably not. The same thing happened with Marshall years ago after Bob Pruitt left. I mean, Mark Schneider came in and Marshall had several straight losing seasons. So it's hard when you have a great head coach like that and he leaves. It's hard to replace that, and it's hard to just pick up the slack unless you're truly just loaded with some unbelievable talent. It's hard to do that. I mean, so you know, the season's a marathon. It's not a sprint. So it's just the first game. So I think that they can definitely can and will improve from that game. But touching on some grades here now about this game, starting with the quarterback play, what would you grade your quarterback for overall or however for this game against Central Arkansas?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we went over Stephen Duncan's stat line. I mean, he had a good game on paper. If you just look at paper, you know, 66% completions. Unfortunately, a couple interceptions, just bad throws, and he had a touchdown. So over 300 yards. So good game, not great game. Obviously not enough to lead us to victory. I'm giving him a B-. You know, I'd like to see him get a little bit more comfortable. I think he was better than last year when I don't think he ever really got in a rhythm. He always, you know, you're always kind of looking over your shoulder when you don't know if you're even going to start the game till the day of the game. So he definitely, you know, came in with a little bit more swagger today or Thursday, and made some plays for us, just didn't make enough to get us over the hump. But he definitely has the talent, the arm, you know, the body size, and even can make some plays with his legs. So I think he'll get there. He'll learn from a loss. He's still got the keys to the car. Helton made that very clear. And, you know, hopefully next game we move that to an A and, you know, take a victory from somebody.
Yeah, I mean, he had some good points. I mean, he obviously is a talented guy, and he had some good moments. But it's just you'd like to see some more consistency with him and the rest of the team. Now looking at the offensive side, what would you grade the overall offensive grade for this game?
Yeah, I mean, just based on 28 points alone, you know, 14 of those in the first 10 minutes or so of the game. I think 6 minutes to go in the first quarter, it was 14-0. And then we had the ball back, you know, a chance to make it 21. And after we stalled on that drive, that really seemed to kind of turn the tide, in my opinion. We turned the ball over. We let them score. Then it kind of felt like, oh, gosh, now we have to score. And we just kind of overthought it. Just the fact that they only scored 28 points, I'm going to give them a C-. You know, I'd like to see more points against an FCS school. They had plenty of yardage, you know, rushing, receiving, the quarterback. We just didn't finish drives. We didn't stick with what worked. You know, first true game starting, you know, a season opener for the quarterback and for the coach. Yeah, we probably should have relied a little bit heavier on the running game and then let the quarterback get comfortable, get settled in. But we kind of went away from that, ended up losing a game. So I'm going to give them a C-.
Yeah, it definitely seems fair. I mean, when you have nearly 500 total yards, you would expect more points than what they ended up with, and especially against an FCS team. But a lot of that stuff could get corrected in the future, perhaps. So talking about the defensive side now, like you mentioned, kind of got shredded a lot in the secondary at times, but they only gave up 20 yards rushing. You know, there was some very good things and some very bad things from the defense. So what would you grade the defense for this game?
Yeah, I mean, if I could break up the defensive grade into the defensive line and then the secondary, the defensive line and the linebackers would get an A. I mean, those guys were causing havoc, stopping plays, doing what they need to do. But then the secondary, you know, like we said, Trey Meadows, who we talked about in the cornerback preview, JUCO player, highly touted, rated guy coming in, was supposed to be plug-and-play day one starter. He kind of got abused in this game. And then several plays where safeties were just out of position for over-top help led to some drives being continued, thirds down being converted, long touchdown plays. You know, I'd give the secondary a not friendly grade. I'd give the defensive line an A. But if we blend that together, I'm going to give it a C minus. That may be a little generous in the loss and giving up that many yards to an FCS school. But like I said earlier, I think there are positives. There are things that we can improve upon. Being out of position, we can fix that. But overall, a little bit below average performance, so C minus.
Yep, definitely fair. Looking at the special teams now, what would you say, how you think they did for you grade-wise?
Yeah, nothing really stood out there. There was, no big returns, no missed kicks, no fumbles, nothing really happened on the special teams play. They didn't make a play, break something open. Every punt that I remember was a fair catch from what I recall. So special teams really didn't get a big chance to show what they could do, but they also didn't shoot themselves in the foot and give them a short field or shank a punt, miss an extra point, anything like that. So I'm just going to give the special teams a B, just based upon the extra points were made. We didn't miss them. Freshman kicker came in and did what he had to do. Haggerty punting the ball, you could tell he had a big leg on him and flipped the field very nicely. So did what we need to do there. So I'll give those guys a B.
Yeah, definitely seems fair. Like you said, not much to go on, but nothing really bad out of them. Now, this is going to be a big one considering it's Tyson Helton's first game as the head coach of Western Kentucky. What about the coaching grade for this game? How did the new coordinators look? How did they do? How did he look? What stood out? What was bad? What was good? What would you grade the coaching for his first game at Western?
Yeah, I just hate that we had a lead early and then kind of went away from what was working. And even in the fourth quarter, and to give the ball back, enough times for them to score 21 points is bothersome. So, the defensive side, allowed too many big plays, explosive plays. I think there were at Helton's press conference today, I think he mentioned, 7 big explosive plays that really were kind of the difference in the game. Then offensively, just kind of getting everybody in sync, getting everybody on the same page. Would like to see that tighten up a little bit. So I'm going to give the coaching a C minus, below average, not an indictment by any means on the coaches as a whole, but when you lose to an opponent that you quote unquote shouldn't lose to ever, you just have to kind of look in the mirror and see, what did we do wrong? What adjustments do we need to make? Because they have the playmakers there to win this ball game, to win, almost every ball game on their schedule. They have playmakers there. We just have to put them, completely in position to make the best decisions and execute and come out with a victory. So I'm going to give them a C minus.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with that. It's a good assessment. So an overall grade for this game, I know you expected more. I know every Western Kentucky fan expected more, but overall for this game. Yeah,
overall I'm going to give them a C minus. Probably could have been a little bit more sticky on that and went down on it, but I'll just keep harping on, this team looked better on the field. There was no dumb coaching decisions that reared their ugly head. And, funny enough, the Utah State game, Mr. Sanford, he just can't help himself. He went for it on fourth down deep in their territory, and they didn't convert. They lost by 3 points. So, he can't get out of his own way sometimes. But, overall, I was impressed by the coaching staff. There was no dumb mistakes. I don't remember any delay of games. We didn't have 12 men on the field ever. Just no stupid stuff. They kind of got out of rhythm and out of flow with what was working. We got away from that, I guess, when the game got a little bit tighter, when it was 14-7, 14-14, and kind of went away from running the ball, which was working very well. So I'm going to go with a C minus. I think that's a good, fair, and healthy grade for them.
Definitely seems fair, especially given all those points you brought up. That seems like a pretty fair grade, but definitely looking for improvement from week 1 to week 2. Everybody always talks about, a team makes its most improvement from the first game to the second game. So we'll see if that rings true for Western and Marshall. We'll see if that rings true. But on the other side of this break, we're going to get into some previews Both teams have some pretty big games coming up. Western actually playing a conference game already, and then Marshall playing on the road at a team they've never played. And, well, I shouldn't say never played, but a team that they haven't played in a long, long time, and one of the big boys, so to speak, in my opinion, in college football, even though we're in the group of 5. So on the other side of this break, we'll start with it. Hang with us. It's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast.
Boise State and Marshall. 4th down for Marshall. They are 16 of 22 this year in converting 4th downs, which is nearly amazing. They need about 2 feet. They go to Parker on the toss sweep. He'll get the 1st down and the touchdown.
Touchdown, Marshall.
So Jim Donnan gambles, but it pays dividends. 16-0, pending the extra point.
A little easier to gamble when you're up 10-0 already. And here you see the low-angle shot of Chris Parker coming right into your living room right there as he avoids the would-be tacklers from Boise State. Again, good blocking. Nobody from the inside can get out and cut Parker off to turn him inside to where more blue jerseys exist.
All right, and we are back from break. We're going to be talking some game previews. We're going to start off with Marshall's big matchup against Boise State. Like you alluded to earlier, they are kind of one of the big kind of G5 schools in college football. They're going to be in line to potentially play in the New Year's Six Bowl if they win out with their schedule and their talent that they have. Boise State started out this past week with a victory over the Fighting Willie Taggarts at Florida State. Comeback victory. They end up winning that game 36-31. Currently, Boise State is an 11-point favorite in this game. And ESPN Power Index, really, really, really favors Boise State. 86.5% chance of them winning and 13.5% for Marshall there. So, sounds like they really like Boise. I tend to think that Marshall might really give them a scare and surprise some people. So I think it should be a fun game, that's for sure. Jumping into some players to watch for, to know on the Boise State squad. They're led by a true freshman quarterback, 6'1", 200-pound Hank Backmeyer. In their first game against FSU, who was 34 out of 47 for 401 yards and 3 touchdowns. And like we said, led them to a comeback victory at Florida State. Actually, Boise held them scoreless in the second half, so Florida State jumped out to a big early lead. They came back and won the game, and just really impressive for any quarterback, but especially a freshman quarterback on the road. That's huge. And then their leading wide receiver at this point in the season, C.T. Thomas, 5'8", 180-pound junior. He had 5 catches for 103 yards against Florida State. And then their running back, Robert Mahone, had 24 carries, 142 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And that is a 5'10", 216-pound junior. So definitely some skill, some talent. I think Boise is they're always in that position. They're well coached. They always bring in some talented guys. They're always, challenging for the Mountain West title and a bowl game. And right now, early season predictions have them possibly going to a New Year's Six Bowl, like we mentioned earlier. So tough team. It's kind of good, in my opinion, that it's not the first game for Marshall. Let them kind of work out those first game jitters and kinks. But now that it's early in the season, I definitely, even as 11-point underdogs, I definitely could see Marshall covering that and keeping it closer than 11. And to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if they pull an upset. I think Marshall is consistently one of the better G5 teams as well, and they've proven that over the last decade plus. So, in my opinion, this game's up for anybody's grabs. I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of scoring, just a lot of playmakers, and it definitely should be a fun one to watch. With that being said, Trace, looking at this matchup, what would you say are the 4 keys to victory for your Thundering Herd?
Oh, well, they're going to probably have to do more than 4 things, but I wrote down 4 things that I feel like would be the most beneficial for them to follow. But real quick, I mean, I was looking into this game a little closer, and looking into some of Boise State's success and stuff, and it's absolutely ridiculous how good they've been over the last 20 years. I mean, it really is, honestly, like, not enough people realize how great, consistently great Boise State is. Yes, they're in a group of 5, whatever, but they have not had a losing season in football since 1997. I mean, really? That's a long time that they've had winning records every single year. And over that time frame, since they've last had a losing record, since then, they are 223-49 overall. They've won 82% of their games over the last 21 seasons. I mean, that's frightening good for a group of 5 team, because most of the time, if you're in a group of 5, you have some great years stringed together, and then you kind of fall off a little bit. They don't fall off. Even with coaching changes, whatever, 16 out of those 21 seasons, they've had 10 or more wins. They've had 12 top 25 finishes, 13 conference titles, 12 bowl wins, 3 Fiesta Bowl wins. I mean, it's just, in my opinion, they're the Alabama or Clemson of the group of 5. No disrespect to UCF, because they're the hot thing right now going, and rightfully so. They've been the best group of 5 team in the country over the last couple of years. But overall, in my opinion, Boise State's still the top dogs. And that's why I really look forward to this series, because they're coming to Huntington next year. It's going to be phenomenal. This is a huge measuring stick game for Marshall, because this is a team that you have to, if you want to measure how good you are in terms of the group of 5, Boise State's a great team to play. They're pretty much the best team you can play to see how you measure up with the best at your level, which is a group of 5. So looking into some of those points to victory for Marshall, first one I wrote down was open up the playbook offensively. I actually said that last week for VMI, but then I disregarded it because it was like you didn't want to tip Boise off on too much. But now that they haven't seen any of the stuff on film, open up the playbook. I want to see some crazy stuff, some creative stuff. I feel like they're holding some of that back, hopefully, for this game, because I don't think you can beat Boise just straight up if you're Marshall, because I think that Boise probably has a little more talent across the board than Marshall does, some more seasoned players probably. So I feel like you're going to have to get a little tricky to keep up with them. So open up the playbook offensively, catch them off guard, throw in some wrinkles that they're not prepared for. Second point is you have to win the turnover margin outright. If Marshall loses the turnover margin in this game, they're toast. They have no chance. So they lost their turnover margin to VMI, but of course it didn't matter. But it was only 2-1. So in this game, you have to win a turnover margin outright. It can't be 2-2. It can't be 3-3. It's got to be outright. And quite frankly, I would go as far as to say Marshall can't really afford to turn the ball over at all. Now, the only way that that's going to be disregarded is if Boise goes out and has 4 or 5 turnovers themselves, and I don't see that happening in their home opener. So Marshall has to win the turnover margin outright, in my opinion, to win the game. Next point is I think they have to weather the storm. Meaning that Boise State, this is going to be their first home game of the year after they had just come off of a huge road win at Florida State, comeback win. They're going to come out fired up. The crowd's going to come out fired up. It's Friday night, national TV, ESPN2. They're going to come out on fire. They're going to come out guns a-blazing. Marshall's going to have to weather that storm, because if they get down 14-0, 21-0, it's over. So you can't afford to let that happen. You have to weather the storm, so to speak. So that's a big, big focal point to me in this one. And then final point is I think you got to have sound tackling from start to finish. It's got to be sound tackling, because I noticed in the VMI game, even though it didn't matter in the slightest really, they had a few missed tackles that they normally don't have. But in this game, that can't happen. You're going to have to go out there. You can't have a bunch of missed tackles. You're going to have to play sound defensively and sound tackling. You're going to have it to have a chance to win it. So I think those 4 points would be very beneficial, crucial for Marshall if they want to win this game and have success ultimately.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think, going on the road against that caliber of an opponent, like you said, you just have to have a clean game. The sound tackling, you've got to wrap guys up, fundamentals. You got to value the football, no turnovers, limit turnovers at least. All valid points. And then, the only one I would add is score more points than them. Steal the
always
W.
Works.
That one works every time. With that said, with all this talent on the Marshall team, I think that first game, especially seeing some new guys, some new names, kind of popping up and making plays and proving themselves worthy of seeing more playing time. Who would you say is your 200-proof player for this big matchup with Boise State?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of guys that are going to have to play well, of course. I mean, pretty much everybody's going to have a good game. But ultimately, I feel like if Marshall has a chance to win this game, and if they want to win this game, it's going to be behind Isaiah Green. I think he has to have a great game. And honestly, I think that you can make the argument that he's going to have his best game in Kelly, Green, and White to win this game, because for Marshall to have a chance to win. Because, I mean, he's had obviously some great games, had a really good game against VMI, but you want to see him take that next step. And if he could go on the road to Boise, Idaho, knock off Boise State, where they might be flirting with a top 25 ranking on the road, their first home game of the year after just beating Florida State, if he can pull that off, he's a made man for the rest of the season. I mean, that would be huge because, like I said, this is a measuring stick game for anybody in a group of five that wants to reach that, possible New Year's Six level, Access Bowl level. This is a big game for that. So I think it's got to be behind the shoulders of Isaiah Green. He has to have a great game. He can't just have a good game or a decent game or a pretty good game. It has to be a great game. And if he does that, then I think Marshall's got more than a puncher's chance to pull it off.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think if he can pull this one off, I think that would definitely be a statement made and kind of definitely a good start to his sophomore year. So that being said, 11-point underdogs, 13.5% chance to win according to ESPN's Power Index. What is your score prediction? How do you have this thing playing out for your Thundering Herd?
Well, I've kind of been thinking about this score for a while. I started out with one score. I texted a buddy of mine, and now I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that one. I'm not going to be a homer and just say, oh, Marshall's going to win. I'm not going to be a homer because I've always prided myself on being a realistic diehard fan. There's not quite enough of those, in my opinion, for any team. So I'm going to say Boise State wins 34-21 over Marshall. That would be a cover, of course, by the spread. I don't necessarily even think the game would be that far of or big of a blowout. I feel like maybe it could be like Boise State has to score a final touchdown to kind of pull away in the fourth quarter. I could see it being like that. I mean, this is thinking about it like this. This is an extremely tough first road game, really, for anybody in the country. I mean, that's a long trip. This is by far the longest trip that Marshall has made with Doc Holliday as the head coach. I mean, it's like 2,000 plus miles. They're having to leave early. It's a short week as it is. Friday night game way out in Boise. I mean, it's going to be just a tough game. Now, I think Marshall has a chance. I really do. I'm not going to just write them off. But at the same time, I've kind of been viewing this before the season started as probably a loss. Now, they could win, like I said, but it just seems like there's too much kind of stacked against Marshall. It's too early in the season. If this was a little later on, then maybe they would have a better chance. But, I mean, we'll see. I hope for the best, of course, but I'll just play on the conservative side and say Boise State wins 34-21, and Marshall falls to 1-1 with two huge home games after that with Ohio and Cincinnati.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair score prediction. I know it's hard to pick against your team, and I know you didn't ask me to do this, but I have kind of alluded to my feelings of the game. I think it's going to be closer than 34-21. I actually wrote down 34-31. So we're like-minded in the points to win the game, but I think Marshall's going to keep it within a field goal. I think, maybe even a game-winning field goal, kind of a dramatic ending for Boise State to kind of pull off a victory at home and, possibly play for a New Year's Six ball at the end of the season. So I think Marshall keeps it close. I think both teams are talented, and I think it's going to be a fun game to be a part of and get to watch, especially, returning back to the Joan next year. That'll be really fun.
No doubt about it. I cannot wait for that game. That's going to be one of the probably highest attended games in that stadium's history. I can't wait for that one. But switching gears now to the Western Kentucky side of things, they have a huge game coming up. It's even huger now that they're off of an 0-1 start, but it's huge because it's the first conference game of the year in week 2. The Hilltoppers will host Florida International Panthers, the preseason number 2 pick in the Conference USA East Division. I believe they had 9 of the 9 first-place votes to Marshall's 14, so they're pretty much considered neck and neck in the East. But FIU's come off a very, very tough start last week themselves. They got absolutely throttled by Tulane on the road, 42-14. Nobody saw that coming. Tulane's not been a very good team over the last few years, but they absolutely throttled FIU, who's projected to be a Conference USA contender. So nobody saw that coming. So both FIU and Western Kentucky are both coming into this game with very similar circumstances. Both teams really need a win. Western obviously losing to Central Arkansas in the first week. FIU getting blown out on the road to a perceived average or subpar American Conference team. So a lot at stake in this game. Of course, looking at the ESPN Football Power Index, that favors FIU 71.3% chance to win. The spread currently favors FIU by 8 points, which is a little bit, strong maybe, but it's not that strong considering Western just lost at home to an FCS team. But on the flip side of that, FIU looked horrible in that first game. So not really sure what to expect from either team. Both teams are really in desperate need of a win. And a little more context of that Tulane game, they gave up 545 total yards to Tulane and gave up 350 rushing yards to Tulane. So looks like Western might be able to run the ball on this FIU defense. That's really bad. And on the flip side of that, they only put up 267 total yards and only 59 rushing yards. So FIU just looked like a mess in that first game. So we'll see what comes of that if Western take advantage of that. Few players to look out for FIU. Of course, quarterback James Morgan, senior. He was, I believe, a second-team all-conference guy. He was projected to be a preseason second-team all-conference guy this year by Phil Steele. Last year, it was 213 for 326, a 65.3% completion, 2,727 yards, 26 touchdowns, only 7 picks. He's considered to be one of the 2 or 3 best quarterbacks in the conference, along with Mason Fine and whoever else you want to throw in there. Had a so-so game against Tulane. Of course, it didn't matter in the end because they got blown out, but he seems like a very solid quarterback for FIU. And then another guy to look out for is Maurice Alexander. This guy really does it all for FIU. He's a wide receiver. He's played some running back, punt returner. He's even been in at quarterback a little bit, I believe. But some of his stats from last year, 17 carries for 115 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also had 40 catches for 474 yards and 5 touchdowns. And he averaged 14.6 yards per punt return, and he had a punt return for a touchdown. First team all-conference punt returner last year. And preseason first team all-conference punt returner for Phil Steele. So very versatile guy there. A couple defensive players. We have Sage Lewis, linebacker. He's a senior. He had 108 tackles last year. I believe that was the most tackles in a single season in FIU history. 1 sack, 9 pass breakups, 1 quarterback hurry. He's a first-team all-conference preseason selection by Phil Steele, and I believe he was first-team all-conference following the 2018 season. Another guy defensively we have is Tier Tart, if I'm pronouncing that name right, junior defensive tackle. Had 17 tackles last year, 4 sacks, 3 TFLs, 1 pass breakup. A lot of people are expecting him to have a breakout year. He's a preseason first-team all-conference selection by Phil Steele as well. So FIU's got talent, even though it really did not show in that Tulane game. They have a lot of talent, and they're perceived to be a Conference USA contender. So a lot at stake in this game for both teams. There's just no putting a price on how big a win could be for both teams because nobody wants to start 0-2. I mean, that would be a really bad start to the year. Especially as with starting 0-1 in conference. So what's this game look like to you, Stephen? What do you think? What do you expect to see from the tops in this one? Do you think they rebound? What do you think about FIU heading into this game reeling? So what do you think overall?
Yeah, I mean, both teams are going to come in and have a lot to prove and want to shake off the bad performances from week 1. Really, really, really did not expect to see that final score with Tulane. FIU kind of seemed to be heading in the right direction with Butch as their coach to possibly contend for a conference title this year. But then to take that kind of beating to Tulane, like you said, not historically very good recently, kind of a little bit of reason to be optimistic about the chances in this game, especially when you look at the yardage given up on the rushing side of it. I mean, if that doesn't ring bells in our coaching staff's head of what we need to try to focus on to get this victory. I just don't know what to say. I mean, we've got to rush the ball. But it should be an interesting game. I mean, neither team wants to start 0-2. And this one counts, conference games, the conference season, those non-conference games, while you want to win them and can put you in some positions for, bowl game consideration, et cetera. The conference game and the standings is really what's going to matter. So facing our first one, week 2, I think we definitely have a chance to steal victory. But I know they're also going to be looking to clean up their performance as well and coming in hungry, trying to reassert themselves and show why they were, one of those East favorites along with you all.
Yeah, I mean, you just really can't quite – for a week 2 matchup, this is a very, very big game for both teams. I mean, starting 0-2, you just don't ever want that to happen, first of all. But then once you start looking at it a little closer, especially for Western Kentucky, if they start 0-2, the schedule does not get any easier for them because after FIU, they have a neutral site game with Louisville, who looked pretty decent against Notre Dame tonight as we're recording this. So it looks like Louisville might be on the mend, so to speak, after a 2-10 year. And then, of course, Western after that was facing UAB at home, who won the conference last year. So there's a lot at stake for both of these teams. It just seems like this is almost a must-win. You kind of hate to use that phrase this early, but for FIU especially, it's a must-win because they're projected to do some stuff. And so far, they've just looked like a pretender, although it's been one game. But they need to right the ship and throw it to Western starting 0-1. They don't want to start 0-2. So looking at it a little closer here, what are your keys to victory for Western Kentucky to pull off this win? Actually, will be considered an upset win, even though it's a home game. What do you think Western has to do to win bullet point wise?
Well, the first one, and I put a lot of exclamation points beside it, is run the ball.
Yep.
I really think that they may have found something good in Gage Walker. I mean, he seemed durable, explosive, good head on his shoulders, making good decisions, good cuts. And, I really think we need to lean on the run game, get behind those big boys. The big boys were doing work and creating holes and pretty good in pass protection. So I think, we need to run the ball, try to slow this game down, let the clock run. When you're coming in as the underdog, let's try to keep the ball out of their hands. Basically play keep away, grind the ball down the field, and get points. So run the ball is point number 1. The second one, kind of cliche. It might be an every week bullet point, but I think we have to win turnovers. We can't flip the ball to FIU, give them short fields, and pretty much have empty drives. We just can't do that. We're going to need every single point that we can get, which leads me to my third point, which is finish drives. When we have the ball, having a bunch of 3-and-out stalls and punts is not going to work for us. When we get across 50-yard line in their territory, we've got to put points on the board, whether that's 7 or whether that's, taking the field goals when they're there. When you're trying to upset somebody, especially a conference division favorite, you got to score every point that's available to you. So we've got to get down, get the offense in rhythm, get them in sync, and finish those drives. And then the last point basically goes straight to the first game and kind of what I saw as letting us be upset is the secondary has to be more disciplined and stay home in their assignments. Whatever defensive alignment they come out in, we were out of position a lot. And when you get burned by an FCS school, I don't think that bodes well for what might happen against, somebody in the next division up that might have some more talented wide receivers across the board. So, hopefully we tighten that part of the scheme up. All preseason long, we've kind of touted that group as being the most, probably the most talented of our team is, what we have returning in our secondary. So, that game 1 performance was a little bit troubling for that reason. The defensive line and the linebackers stepped up, but hopefully the secondary can clean up kind of what they missed and didn't get right in the first game. Keep the receivers in front of them and make some plays. We didn't have any turnovers in that first game. So secondary discipline is my fourth key to victory, stopping the big plays.
Yeah, all good points. And I feel like if Western wants to win the game or has a chance to win the game, they probably will have to follow those points as closely as possible. So looking at it a little closer personnel-wise, who do you think has to have the great game? Who do you think has to lead the charge offensively, defensively, whatever? So who's your pick for the 200-proof player for this game against FIU in week 2?
Yeah, I flip-flopped on this a little bit. I was going back and forth between QB1, Mr. Duncan, and then the running back, Mr. Walker there. But I still see our running back situation as a committee. Even Helton kind of said that he's just going to ride the hot hand, whether that's Walker or McClendon or Josh Samuel, possibly Jakari Moses. Whoever's got the hot hand in the game is who's going to get the carry. So I'm not going to put that on Gage Walker just yet. I'm going to put it on Stephen Duncan. I think he had a pretty good game against UCA, but we've got to cut down those interceptions. Both of them were just kind of bad balls where the receiver was actually open, just wasn't thrown in proper placement to make the proper play and get a completion. So, I think Duncan can have another big game stat-wise. I think in this offense he's going to run it well. He's got the arm for it. He's got the talent for it. He just has to make the right decision. So I think Stephen Duncan, to pull off this upset is going to have to kind of be the guy that takes us there, gets us over that hump, and, almost puts the team on his back kind of like he did last year and led us to our 3 victories last year. So give me Mr. Duncan. He's got to be the guy.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the case. I mean, a quarterback can't just – odds are you're not going to have a chance to win many games if the quarterback play isn't stellar or great or whatever you want to call it. It's going to have to be there. Same can be said for this game. So with that being said, it's time for some score predictions here, at least from you. I might think of something in my head and keep it in my head and see how it turns out. But looking at it from your perspective as the West Kentucky co-host here, what do you think the score will look like for this game? Can Western pull the upset? Can they avoid 0-2 heading into Louisville? What do you think is going to happen? So let's hear a score prediction.
Yeah, and kind of like you said, it feels like a must-win game. It doesn't get any easier going to Nashville at LP Field and playing Louisville next week, and then having last year's conference champion UAB the following week or back at home. So could be staring at 0-4 real quick if we lose this game. I kind of take that same angle as you. I try to be realistic in my expectations of what's going to happen. I wrote us down for a loss, covering the spread. I think we're going to be closer than 8. And I wrote it down for 31-24. I think we're going to come up short. Road games are always tough to win. And, I think this team, still might have some mistakes made that leave the door open for FIU to get out of there with a victory. So better than 8, better than the 8-point spread, but it's still taking a loss, 31-24.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a fair score, and I could see that happening. A young team, inexperienced team with a new head coach like Western Kentucky is, you just got to expect some growing pains. You got to kind of take some lumps with them. And it seems like that's kind of where they're at right now. I mean, maybe mid-season after that, they'll start catching on to their groove. But, if they want to have, like you say, if they want to have a chance to get to a bowl game, they're going to have to pull off a couple upsets. And this seems like a very likely chance to pull off an upset, even though it's not considered wouldn't be necessarily that big of an upset. But, this would be a chance to – FIU is going to need this win if they want to keep, pace and try to have a chance to win the East. So we'll see how that plays out. But, yeah, I think that's definitely a fair score prediction. So with that being said, we have reached the end of this week's Moonshine Throwdown podcast. A couple games recapped, a couple games previewed, 2 huge games coming up for both teams in their respective ways. A huge game for Marshall for their group of 5 Group of 5 perception, I would say, and then a huge game for Western Kentucky just for their season's perception and just them trying to right the ship with a new head coach. It's a big game for both teams, and especially since it's a conference game. So with that, Stephen, let's hear some final thoughts as we get ready for week 2. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the fan base just needs to be patient. Like I've said multiple times now, this episode, previous episodes, it's not going to happen overnight. Even looking back to Brom, Taggart, Petrino, the start of their seasons and their tenures as head coaches here weren't easy. And I think we'll get there. The cupboard isn't bare. There's playmakers there. And, I don't think it'll be as bad as a 3-9 season. I think we'll be better than that. Definitely the product on the field after one game was better than that, even in defeat. So, hang in there. I know it's easy to hang your head, and I'm bummed that we lost. But at the end of the day, we are trending in the right direction. And then along with those final thoughts, just kind of switching gears, just thinking about the, Hurricane Dorian down there in Florida. I know it's beating up the Bahamas right now, and it's bearing down kind of on Florida and Katie's area there. So wishing the best for them, hoping everybody stays safe. And, if they need to get out of Florida, get away and be safe. I hope that's the decision they do and make so he can get back here and be with us. And then, think about your guy, Yuli, just glad to hear good thoughts about his health. And that he was back at practice. Man, that's huge. That morale boost. And like you said, I think they could definitely end up riding that to just a big year, playing for him and winning some ball games. Just that, I mean, that could be a game changer. It's crazy to say losing somebody could be a game changer, but I think they're still a good balls club, even without him. So that's my final thoughts. At the same time, kind of segue into yours. What are your final thoughts for this week 1, and heading into a big week 2?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely echo everything you said about the hurricane situation. I mean, just thoughts on going out to anybody that could be affected by this. Anybody in that area down there, especially KD. We missed him on here this week, but we'll try to get him back next week. I'm sure he'll probably be in better shape weather-wise next week, not with the threat of not having to lose power and everything. So good well wishes go out to everybody down in those areas that could be affected by the hurricane. And of course, Jaquan Yuli, so happy to see that he's doing well after that. I mean, that was really the first time I think I've ever seen a scene like that in person, to be honest. I mean, you always see it on TV, unfortunately. You never want to see it for anybody, but especially if it's one of your own players on your favorite team or whatever. So it's just really tough. And I think that's definitely going to be a big morale booster for this season. They kind of rode that momentum with Evan McKelvey's injury. Like I said, they did that a few years ago in 2014, where they almost always had a player defensively or even offensively wear McKelvey's jersey. I think the same should be done for Yuli. I think that's going to be a huge motivational tactic moving forward. So we'll see how that plays out. And, thoughts and prayers and everything else to Yuli trying to recover from a serious injury. And then as far as just a stain for Marshall, I mean, I can't say it enough. This is a huge game. This is a test that they've been wanting this game for a while. I mean, I remember when this series was scheduled 4 or 5 years ago, everybody was excited about it because it's 2 historically elite Group of 5 programs going at it. Boise State, like I said, the Alabama or Clemson of the Group of 5, in my opinion. Marshall, kind of having their moments in the sun in that light as an elite Group of 5 program. We'll see if they can get back to that level like they were at 2014. I mean, in that season, 2014, there was no denying the 2 top Group of 5 teams that year, Boise State and Marshall, and record wise, final ranking wise, bowl wise, whatever, that's how it ended up being. So these 2 programs have kind of been intertwined over the years. I think they've even played in the FCS playoffs back in the early to mid 90s. They both came up to the FBS around the same time, Marshall in 97, Boise in 96. So it's going to be a really huge game. I'm really looking forward to watching it. it's going to be almost surreal seeing Marshall play on the blue field, because like you always watch everybody else play on that field, but you never see your team play. So it's going to be a very interesting game. I can't wait to watch it. I hope Marshall has a chance. So we'll see how it goes, but I'm excited for it.
Yeah, man, absolutely agree. Huge game coming up. Well, man, another good episode. We're gonna get out of here, and we'll see y'all next time. I'll send us out with a Go Tops and Trace.
Go Herd.
See y'all next time.